Women are demanding that men take them back. Men have walked away for good, and women are staring down a reality they never thought would hit them this hard. You know, when you are sitting at the bar with your buddies and the conversation turns to how the whole dating scene flipped upside down faster than anyone expected, that is exactly where we are right now because women are finally waking up to the fact that men meant every word when they said enough is enough, and the peace we found in stepping back is here to stay. They pushed and pushed for decades, thinking the system would always favor them. But now the support is gone, the free rides are finished, and the struggle is real as the economy tightens and they realize they cannot make it on their own the way they assumed they could. Stick around all the way through because what we are about to lay out shows exactly how this shift happened, why it is permanent, and what it means for the future that is already unfolding in ways that will leave no doubt about who holds the cards now. Reality is finally starting to set in for modern women, and they are beginning to understand that men were serious all along when we decided to stop chasing, stop providing, and stop playing a game that was stacked against us from the start. For years, women leaned on the idea that men would always step up to cover the basics from meals to rent to emotional support and even simple fixes around the house. But those days are over because men discovered something powerful in the process of walking away. And that is the deep, lasting peace that comes from keeping our time, our money, and our energy for ourselves instead of pouring it into relationships that offered little in return. Think about how things used to work in the old setup, where a guy would take a woman out, handle the bills, sort out her tech problems, or help with the rent when times got tight. And in exchange, he got some company and the sense that he was needed. But over time, that balance broke down completely as expectations rose while the respect and reciprocity disappeared, leaving men with the short end of the stick every single time. Women had built a system through years of cultural shifts where they could demand more and more while giving less and less. And men went along with it for a long time because that was what society taught us to do. Until one day, enough of us woke up, realized the rigging, and chose to exit the whole arrangement altogether. Which is why we are seeing this massive wave of men focusing inward on their own growth, their careers, their health, and their quiet, independent lives without the constant pull of drama and unmet needs. The dating economy collapsed right alongside the simp economy, and that double hit has left women scrambling in a way they never anticipated because suddenly there are no more free meals, no more guys lining up to pay for Ubers or cover phone bills, and no more casual labor where men would drop everything to troubleshoot a computer or fix a leaky faucet just to earn a bit of attention that never really materialized into anything meaningful. Men figured out that the old provider role was no longer valued in any real sense. And instead of sticking around to be used as walking wallets or emotional sponges, we pulled back en masse, which created this vacuum where women who once relied on those subsidies to stretch their budgets or maintain a certain lifestyle are now facing the raw costs of living on their own without that hidden support network propping them up. It is straightforward when you look at it because the average man can simplify his life down to the essentials, cut expenses to the bone, and still feel content with a small place, a steady routine and time to pursue what actually matters to him. But women were never built the same way. And the data from every corner of society is showing they struggle mightily when the husband, the family structure, or the community backup is missing, leaving them exposed to skyrocketing rents, rising food prices, and the heavy mental load of handling everything solo without the buffer that men used to provide. This is not some temporary dip either, because men have tasted the freedom of solitude, and it feels like a weight lifted off our shoulders after decades of being told to approach more, to do more, to give more, while getting criticized for not doing enough or for doing it wrong, which is why the return to that old dynamic is simply not happening no matter how much the pleas increase as times get tougher. Women spent half a century reshaping society through movements that encouraged them to reject traditional roles, push men aside, and rely instead on the state or their own independence as the ultimate safety net. But now that the state is stretched thin and the economy is squeezing everyone, the plan B of rushing back to men for help is falling flat because we have already moved on and locked the door behind us without a second glance. Look at the shift in real terms, where guys who once felt pressured to initiate conversations, pay for everything, and invest endless effort are now content to swipe past profiles, ignore the signals, and invest that same energy into gym sessions, side businesses, or just relaxing with hobbies that recharge them instead of draining them. And this choice has created a ripple effect that women are feeling in their daily lives, from the lack of matches that lead anywhere to the sudden silence when they expect help with basic adult responsibilities. The core truth here is that men adapted faster than anyone predicted by focusing on self reliance and rejecting the chaos that often came with relationships where demands escalated but appreciation stayed flat, leaving us exhausted and undervalued, which is precisely why solitude became the preferred path for so many of us. And it is a path we are not abandoning, even as costs rise and pressures mount across the board. Women, on the other hand, are discovering the hard limits of their design because history and biology both show they thrive best when supported by a stable husband, a tight family unit, or a close community that shares the load. But when those elements are stripped away through their own cultural choices, the result is a growing wave of struggle that includes everything from financial shortfalls to deep emotional voids that no amount of career success or social media likes can fill. This wake up is sobering because it reveals how the old playbook women followed no longer works in a world where men have opted out, and the consequences are playing out in plain sight as more and more women hit their 30s and beyond without the partnerships they assumed would always be available on their terms. Men stopped dating for validation or ego boosts a long time ago and started choosing partners so only if there was real mutual benefit and respect, which filtered out the low effort dynamics that used to dominate and left women who brought high expectations but minimal investment on the outside looking in at a dating scene that feels colder and harder than ever. It is raw, but truthful to say that the frustration building among women comes directly from this mismatch where they still expect the chases, the payments, and the fixes from earlier eras, but men have learned through hard experience that those investments rarely paid off in lasting ways. So now we hold firm to our boundaries and our peace, refusing to re enter the rigged setup that took advantage of us for so long. The economy worsening only sharpens the point because as living costs climb, women who counted on dates to subsidize groceries or outings or even basic tech support are finding those doors closed tight, and the state resources they traded men for are proving inadequate, leaving them to face the full weight of independence without the tools or the resilience that men developed over the same period. Men discovered how wonderful it is to avoid the constant negotiations and emotional labor that came with modern relationships. And that discovery has stuck because once you experience true autonomy with your money in your pocket, your schedule, your own, and your mind free from unnecessary drama, there is no incentive to trade it back for a system that demands everything while offering inconsistent returns. Women traded the reliable provision of husbands and communities for the promise of state support and individual empowerment, but with budgets tightening and that promise falling short, the scramble to reinstate men as the backup plan is not landing because we see it for what it is, a late attempt to restore the old imbalances without fixing what broke them in the first place. This is where the storytelling of our times gets clear. If you follow the arc from the past decades of cultural change to the present moment, where men have collectively stepped back and built lives that do not revolve around chasing or subsidizing, and the result is a quiet strength that women are now confronting with confusion and growing unease. The average woman cannot sustain the lifestyle she once enjoyed through male support because her wiring and societal conditioning prepared her for interdependence rather than total self sufficiency, which is why the current landscape of high expenses and low external help is exposing cracks that run deep into her daily survival and long term security. As the months and years roll on, this pattern only deepens because men are not looking back. We are not second guessing the peace we found, and we are certainly not rushing to bail out the very system that pushed us away in the first place, which leaves women to navigate the beds they made without the safety net they dismantled. Think about the practical side, where simple things like a broken appliance or a software glitch that used to get handled by a willing guy in exchange for some appreciation now become expensive problems women must solve alone or ignore at their own risk. And when you stack that against rent, groceries, and the emotional toll of isolation, the picture becomes one of steady decline for those who bet everything on independence without backup. Men, on the flip side, have streamlined everything to the point where we can live comfortably on far less, thrive in our routines, and even enjoy the solitude that allows real personal growth without the interruptions that once defined our days. And this contrast is what makes the wake up so stark for women who assumed the provider dynamic would always be there when they needed it. The late, great Kevin Samuels captured it perfectly when he warned that ladies' winter has arrived because the hot girl summer of easy access to male resources, attention, and support has ended. And what we are entering now is a colder season of accountability where choices made decades ago come due all at once. The collapse did not happen overnight, but the signs were there for anyone paying attention as men gradually stopped approaching, stopped overextending, and stopped tolerating the one sided efforts that had become the norm in dating and relationships, leading to this point where women are left stunned by how well men are doing without them. In the old days, a woman could count on a stream of guys willing to invest time, money, and labor to keep her afloat or entertained. But that stream dried up once men realized the returns were diminishing and the risks were rising from financial exploitation to emotional burnout. So the rational move was to withdraw and redirect all that energy inward, where it actually compounded into better lives for us. Women are not designed to carry the full load alone without the partnership of husbands or the cushion of traditional communities. And the evidence is mounting in the form of increased struggles with basic living costs, mental strain, and a profound sense of something missing that no career or social circle seems to replace. Which is why the pleas for men to step back in are growing louder, even as we remain firmly in our chosen peace. This is the sobering part that demands attention because it is not about blame or anger anymore. It is about the straightforward outcome of actions taken over generations, where one side pushed too far and the other side finally listened and walked away, leaving the field permanently changed. Men have found their groove in focusing on self improvement, financial stability, and the simple joys of a drama free existence, which allows us to weather economic pressures with far greater ease than those who built their worlds around external validation and support that is no longer forthcoming. The rigged system women helped create through cultural narratives that painted men as disposable providers while elevating their own independence above all else has backfired in spectacular fashion now that the provider pool has dried up and the independence is being tested against real world hardships without the fallback options that used to exist. It feels like a bar conversation among friends when we lay it out this way because everyone can see the pattern. If they are honest, the years of men being told to do better, to give more, to approach despite rejection after rejection, until we collectively said no more and turned our attention to building something sustainable for ourselves alone. Women on the receiving end of the shift are experiencing the full force of that decision through everything from empty dating calendars to mounting bills they once shared or offloaded. And the frustration is palpable because the playbook that worked before is now obsolete, and there is no quick fix to restore it when the men who once played along have moved on for good. This transition marks a new chapter where the power dynamics have flipped in ways that favor self reliant men who value their peace above all, and women are left to adapt or face the growing consequences of a society that no longer subsidizes their choices the way it once did through male effort and resources. The average man thrives on minimal input because we have honed the skills of efficiency, resilience, and contentment in solitude over these years of opting out, while the average woman faces steeper challenges in the same environment precisely because her strengths were always tied to connection and shared responsibility rather than going it completely alone. As the economy continues to challenge everyone, the disparity becomes even clearer, with men tightening their belts without complaint and continuing to build, while women confront the reality that the state they turn to as a replacement cannot match what husbands and communities once delivered in practical daily support. The storytelling here is one of cause and effect, where decades of encouraging women to walk away from traditional structures left them unprepared for the solitude men have mastered. And now, the bill is coming due in the form of financial strain, emotional isolation, and a dawning awareness that the game they thought they controlled has ended without warning. And men are not going back because the peace we discovered in walking away is too valuable to trade for a return to the old imbalances where our contributions were expected but rarely matched and our boundaries were ignored until we enforced them by leaving the field entirely. Women who once benefited from the simp economy of endless male investment in dates, labor, and emotional labor are now learning to live without it. And the adjustment is proving difficult because the foundation they relied on was never built to withstand total independence under pressure. This is the raw truth that cuts through the noise because it is backed by the observable shifts in how people are living and relating today, with men reporting higher satisfaction in singlehood and women expressing increasing frustration with the new landscape that demands they handle everything solo without the previous safety nets. The wake up call is loud and clear for those willing to hear it. The system was reset when men chose themselves, and the resulting world is one where women must now prove their value in ways they never had to before, or accept the solitude they once promoted as empowering, but are finding far less comfortable in practice. As we dig deeper into this new reality, it becomes obvious that the collapse was inevitable once men realized the extent of the rigging and decided the only winning move was not to play at all, which freed us to pursue lives of purpose and calm without the constant drain of mismatched expectations. Women traded the stability of husbands and family networks for the illusion of state backed independence, but with resources stretched and men absent, the cracks are widening into full gaps that affect everything from daily survival to long term security. And no amount of denial can close them now. The bar talk among friends would acknowledge this without sugarcoating because it is simply what happened. The push for change succeeded in removing men from the equation, and the aftermath is women facing a winter they were never prepared for, while men sit comfortably on the sidelines, enjoying the view of a world we no longer feel compelled to fix. This pattern holds across every aspect of life, from the dating scene, where men refuse low effort engagements, to the economic front, where women shoulder costs they once shared, and the emotional realm, where the lack of reliable partnership leaves voids that careers alone cannot fill. The men who walked away did so with eyes wide open. After years of seeing the same cycles repeat, where effort was poured and appreciation was minimal, and the return on investment stayed negative until the only logical step was complete withdrawal and the embrace of personal peace that followed. Women are starting to feel the weight of that withdrawal in tangible ways as the subsidies disappear, the approaches stop, and the support systems they counted on evaporate, leaving them to navigate higher costs and deeper challenges without the buffer that defined their previous experiences. It is a straightforward consequence of choices made over time, where one group sought to redefine the rules in their favor, and the other group responded by exiting the game entirely, which has rewritten the rules for everyone involved in the process. The sobering part is that this is not reversible in the short term because men have built habits of self sufficiency that feel too good to abandon, and women are only now confronting the full implications of living without the interdependence that once sustained them through tough periods. This shift has created a landscape where the average man can weather storms with minimal disruption because his life is streamlined around his own needs and capabilities, while the average woman encounters friction at every turn because her design and past reliance on external provision leave her less equipped for total autonomy in a high cost environment. The storytelling arc reaches its peak here as we see the long term effects unfold with men thriving in their solitude and women adjusting to a reality that demands more from them than they anticipated when they pushed for the changes that led us to this point. Peace for men means keeping our resources close, holding our boundaries firm, and avoiding the chaos that once defined interactions, which is why the return calls are going unanswered even as economic pressures intensify and the pleas grow more direct. Women cannot live indefinitely without the support structures they dismantled, and the current struggles with poverty, isolation, and unmet needs are the direct result of that dismantling playing out in real time across society. Men have locked in on the truth that their time and money are better spent on themselves and their growth, which has led to stronger individual outcomes and a collective strength that no longer bends to the old demands, leaving women to face the winter alone with the beds they prepared through years of cultural redirection. The hard hitting conclusion is that the game is over, the peace is permanent, and the consequences are here to stay, which is why understanding this moment matters more than ever as we move forward into whatever comes next. The shift we are witnessing is not some fleeting trend or temporary backlash. It is the logical endpoint of a long chain of decisions that started decades ago when society began dismantling the mutual obligations that once held relationships and families together in a functional way. Men adapted to the new rules faster and more thoroughly than anyone predicted because survival instincts kicked in the moment we saw that our traditional roles were being redefined as optional burdens rather than valued contributions. We stopped seeing ourselves as default providers, stopped viewing approach as a duty, and stopped accepting the narrative that our worth was tied to how much we could sacrifice for someone else's comfort. Instead, we turned inward, rebuilt our priorities around personal sovereignty, financial discipline, physical health, and mental clarity, and discovered that this inward focus produced results that felt infinitely more rewarding than the old chase ever did. The peace that came from that pivot was not loud or flashy. It was quiet, steady, and addictive once experienced. There was no unexperiencing it, no going back to the noise of constant negotiation, constant performance, and constant risk of being discarded when the next better option appeared. Women, meanwhile, continued operating under the assumption that the old incentives would remain in place indefinitely, that men would keep showing up, keep paying, keep fixing, keep listening, keep absorbing, because that was the pattern they had known their entire lives. They built lifestyles, careers, social circles, and spending habits around the invisible subsidy that flowed from male effort. And when that flow stopped, the entire structure began to wobble, then crack, then collapse in sections. The shock is real because the adjustment is brutal when you go from having a rotating cast of men willing to cover gaps in your budget to suddenly facing every expense head on with no fallback, no casual date to pick up the tab, no handyman on speed dial, no emotional sounding board available 24/7. This is not exaggeration. This is arithmetic. Rent does not negotiate utilities, do not care about your feelings, groceries, do not drop in price because you are attractive and the car still needs repairs, whether or not someone feels motivated to help. The math catches up fast, and when it does, the frustration turns outward first, toward men for supposedly failing to step up, then toward society for not providing the promised alternatives, and finally inward, where the hardest questions start to surface about whether the independence sold as liberation was ever truly sustainable without massive external support. What makes this moment different from previous cycles of dating complaints or gender tension is the permanence men have locked into. We are not sulking, waiting for an apology. We are not plotting revenge. We are simply living better lives on terms we control completely. Gym memberships replaced bar tabs, side hustles replaced nights out, spent impressing someone new, skills replaced, endless swiping investment accounts grew while dating budgets shrank, and the mental bandwidth once consumed by decoding mixed signals got redirected toward actual goals. This is not bitterness. This is clarity born from experience. The experience of investing heavily in people who viewed that investment as baseline entitlement rather than something worthy of reciprocal effort. Men learned that the highest return came from investing in themselves. And once that lesson sank in, the collective behavior changed irreversibly. We are not boycotting women, we are boycotting low value dynamics. And since most modern dating fell into that category, the boycott became sweeping. The result is a market correction where female expectations that once set the terms now sit unmet, and the supply of willing male providers has dropped to near zero. Consider the practical fallout in everyday terms because the theory only lands when you see how it plays out on the ground. A single woman in her late 20s or 30s living in a major city used to stretch her salary further by offloading certain costs onto the men in her orbit. Dinner here rides, their occasional gifts, random help with moving or assembling furniture, even small loans disguised as casual generosity. That ecosystem has evaporated almost overnight, not because men suddenly became stingy, but because the incentive structure flipped when the probability of meaningful return vanished. Why spend $200 on a date when the odds of it leading to anything substantial hover near single digits? Why invest hours troubleshooting her laptop when the thanks evaporate the moment she finds someone flashier? Why cover half the rent when the relationship dissolves? The second finances get discussed seriously. Men ran the numbers emotionally and financially, and the answer came back the same every time. Walk away, protect your assets, protect your time, protect your sanity. The aggregate effect of millions of individual decisions like that is what created the drought women are now complaining about. The drought of attention, the drought of provision, the drought of basic adult assistance that used to flow freely. Women are hitting a wall they did not see coming because their strategy relied on perpetual male disposability. The idea that there would always be another guy ready to step in, no matter how poorly the previous ones were treated. That assumption held for a while longer than it should have because enough men were still socialized to see pursuit as masculine virtue. But socialization only stretches so far when reality keeps slapping you in the face with rejection, exploitation, and diminishing returns. The younger generations of men, especially those coming of age after the social media explosion, saw the patterns, early watched their older brothers and cousins get burned, and decided preemptively that the juice was not worth the squeeze. They skipped the phase of hopeful overinvestment altogether, went straight to self focus, and never looked back. This acceleration compressed what could have been a gradual decline into a sharp drop off, leaving women who entered adulthood expecting the old rules to suddenly confront a completely different game board where the pieces they counted on have vanished. The emotional layer adds another dimension of difficulty because solitude hits differently depending on biological wiring and cultural conditioning. Men have always had a streak of independence baked in historically. We were the hunters, the explorers, the ones sent off to war or distant work while communities stayed behind. That capacity for aloneness got reinforced over generations, and modern life only amplified it with technology hobbies, streaming solo travel, and financial tools that let one person live comfortably without needing constant partnership. Women, by contrast, were shaped by interdependence, the gathering, the child rearing, the social bonding that kept tribes alive. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. Strip away the husband, the extended family, the tight knit circle, and the void feels existential, not just logistical. Career success, social media validation, weekend, brunches with friends. These things fill time, but they do not fill the primal need for a reliable, committed masculine presence that provides protection, provision, and emotional anchoring. When that presence disappears, not temporarily, but structurally, the resulting loneliness compounds faster and deeper than most men experience in reverse. Economic data backs this up in ways that are impossible to ignore. Single women without children consistently show higher rates of financial strain in high cost areas compared to single men in similar brackets, even when incomes are comparable. The gap widens when you factor in lifestyle creep, the tendency to spend more when external subsidies are available, then struggle to downsize when they disappear. Men mastered minimalism early because necessity forced it. We learned to cook basic meals, maintain our own spaces, handle our own repairs because no one else was coming to do it. Women who leaned on male labor for those tasks now face steep learning curves or expensive outsourcing at precisely the moment inflation is eating disposable income. The state was supposed to bridge that gap through expanded welfare housing assistance child credits, but budgets are finite, bureaucracies are slow, and the resources never scaled to replace millions of individual male contributions. The mismatch is glaring and growing. This is where the winter metaphor Kevin Samuels used becomes brutally literal. Hot Girl Summer was the season of peak leverage when youth beauty and social momentum gave women outsized bargaining power in the sexual marketplace. Men competed, fiercely paid premium prices, tolerated poor behavior because the perceived scarcity of high value women drove demand. That season always ends. Biology does not negotiate with cultural narratives, and when it does, the leverage evaporates almost instantly. What replaces it is not equality, it is asymmetry. Men retain optionality longer because our value compounds with status, resources, and competence, while women's value peaks earlier and declines faster in the eyes of the market. The women who rode the hot girl wave hardest are now entering the coldest part of the cycle with the fewest resources to cushion the landing because they spent their prime years maximizing short term extraction rather than building long term partnerships or personal resilience. Men on the other side are not gloating. We are observing from a distance with a mixture of recognition and detachment. We see the social media posts, the podcasts, the articles pleading for men to return to chivalry, to approach again, to take the lead like it is still 1995, and the response is uniform silence or polite refusal. The reason is simple. We have nothing left to prove and everything to lose by re entering a system that punishes effort and rewards entitlement. Peace is not negotiable once you have it, and we have it in abundance. Quiet mornings without arguments, growing bank accounts without cosigners, bodies that stay in shape without nagging hobbies that actually fulfill rather than placate. The trade off was worth it every single day. The broader society feels the ripple effects too. Birth rates continue dropping, marriage rates stay at historic lows, household formation stalls, and entire industries that depended on couples spending suffer. Restaurants, jewelers, wedding planners, real estate in family oriented suburbs all face headwinds when people stop pairing up and building shared lives. The economy that once counted on dual income families to drive consumption now contends with millions of streamlined single male households that consume less and save more, plus millions of female households stretched thin and cutting back. The imbalance creates drag everywhere, but the architects of the cultural shift that produced it rarely acknowledge the downstream costs, preferring instead to frame the problem as male immaturity or toxic masculinity rather than admitting the incentives they championed backfired spectacularly. Yet the conversation remains stuck in loops because acknowledging the full scope would require dismantling decades of ideology that still hold sway in academia, media, and corporate human resources departments. Men have already moved past needing permission or validation. We are living the proof that opting out works better than playing along ever did. Women are slowly being forced to confront the same proof through lived experience rather than theory, and the adjustment period is painful precisely because it is undeniable. No amount of gaslighting, no trending hashtag, no empowerment seminar can pay the rent or fix the car or quiet the ache of prolonged isolation when the external supports have been deliberately removed. Looking forward, the trajectory seems clear. Men will continue consolidating gains, building wealth mastering skills, deepening friendships with other men, and generally thriving in low drama environments. Some will still date, but only on strict terms, high compatibility, genuine mutual respect, and zero tolerance for manipulation or entitlement. The bar has been raised permanently because we know what the alternative feels like and we prefer it. Women who adapt quickest will be those who recognize the reset drop. The outdated expectations invest in their own capabilities and offer real value rather than demanding it as a birthright. Those who refuse to adapt will face deepening hardship, not because men are cruel, but because reality is indifferent to feelings or narratives. This is not the end of romance or connection. It is the end of exploitation disguised as romance, the end of one sided provision, the end of assuming men will always absorb the costs so women can live above their means. What emerges next could be healthier if both sides deal honestly with the new terms, but it will never resemble the old order again. Men walked away, found peace, and stayed gone. The winter is here. The subsidies are gone, and the reckoning is just beginning. The fallout extends beyond individual bank accounts and dating apps into the very structure of how people form households and plan for the future. When men walk away en masse, the downstream consequences hit demographics hard and fast. Marriage rates have been sliding for years, but the current acceleration is different because it is not driven by economic recessions or cultural fads. Alone, it is driven by a fundamental refusal from one half of the population to participate under the existing terms. Fewer marriages mean fewer children born into stable two parent homes, which means fewer people reaching adulthood with models of functional partnership to emulate. The birth rate drop is already below replacement in most developed nations, and the men opting out are accelerating that trend, not out of spite, but out of rational self preservation. A man who keeps his income, his freedom, and his mental health intact has little motivation to sign legal contracts that historically favored women in divorce courts, child custody outcomes, and asset division. The risk reward calculation no longer pencils out for the average guy, especially when he can observe how the last generation of married men fared financially, emotionally, and legally. Women who once viewed marriage as a safety net or a status marker are discovering that the pool of marriageable men willing to take on those risks has shrunk dramatically. The high value men who could provide stability are the same ones who have the most to lose by entering legally binding arrangements where the deck remains stacked against them. They choose instead to stay single, build wealth, date casually if at all, and maintain strict control over their paternity and finances. This creates a feedback loop. The fewer committed men available, the more desperate the remaining women become. The more they double down on unrealistic standards or entitlement, the more men see confirmation that walking away was the correct choice. The cycle reinforces itself until entire age cohorts pass through prime reproductive years without forming families at anything close to historical rates. Societies built on declining populations face slow motion crises. Aging workforces, strained pension systems, overburdened healthcare, and cultural stagnation as fewer young people inherit the values that once sustained growth and innovation. Education and career paths reflect the same divergence. Men are increasingly choosing trades, skilled labor entrepreneurship, or remote tech roles that allow maximum autonomy and minimal social overhead. These paths often pay well without requiring years of credentialing debt or corporate ladder climbing in environments saturated with diversity quotas and sensitivity training. Women, by contrast, still dominate fields that demand long years of schooling, high student loans, and ongoing emotional labor, teaching nursing, social work, administrative roles in large bureaucracies. Those fields, while noble, often come with lower lifetime earnings, compressed pay scales, and burnout from dealing with endless human drama. The irony is, thick women championed career independence as the path to liberation, pursued degrees in record numbers, flooded into white collar jobs, only to find that the economic return on those degrees lags behind what men achieve in blue collar or entrepreneurial routes. The gender pay gap narrative persists, but when you control for hours, worked occupational choice, risk tolerance, and time off, the picture shifts dramatically toward men making pragmatic decisions that maximize take home pay and minimize obligations. Housing markets tell another part of the story. Single men tend to live leaner rent, smaller places, or buy modest properties, outright focus on mortgage payoff early, and avoid lifestyle inflation tied to impressing a partner. Single women often seek larger apartments in desirable neighborhoods closer to social scenes and amenities, which drives up demand in those segments and pushes rents higher, precisely for the demographic least equipped to absorb the increases. The result is a squeeze where women pay premium prices for space they once expected to share costs on, while men pocket the savings and compound them into investments. Real estate investors notice the pattern. Two more single female renters chasing fewer quality units means higher vacancy tolerance for landlords and less negotiating power for tenants. Over time, this contributes to geographic sorting. Men gravitate toward affordable exurbs or smaller cities where costs align with their minimalist approach, while women cluster in expensive urban cores where social opportunities remain, but financial pressure mounts relentlessly. Health outcomes diverge in predictable ways as well. Men who embrace solitude often build routines centered on physical discipline, consistent sleep resistance, training, martial arts, hiking, or other solitary pursuits that improve longevity and mental resilience. The absence of relational stress reduces cortisol spikes, lowers blood pressure, and decreases incidence of stress related disorders. Women facing prolonged isolation combined with financial strain show the opposite pattern: higher rates of anxiety, depression, sleep disruption, autoimmune issues, and reliance on pharmaceuticals to manage mood and energy. The data on single women over 35 paints a concerning picture: increased antidepressant prescriptions, higher therapy utilization, emergency room visits for stress related complaints, all pointing to a body and mind under chronic load without the buffering effect of reliable partnership. Men do not escape hardship entirely, but the hardships they face are more often self chosen and therefore more tolerable because they align with personal agency rather than impose scarcity. Social circle change shape too. Men build tighter, more loyal networks of other men brothers in the gym business, partners, hobby groups, online communities centered on shared interests rather than shared drama. These bonds provide camaraderie, accountability, and practical help without the emotional overhead that often accompanies female friendships, which can involve more frequent conflict, indirect communication, and expectation of constant availability. Women report increasing difficulty maintaining deep friendships as they age, especially when single and childless, because the common ground of family milestones, child rearing, and couple activities disappears, leaving conversations shallower and more transactional. The loneliness epidemic hits hardest among this group, not because women are inherently less capable of connection, but because their social architecture was historically built around family and extended kinship structures that modern independence has eroded. Parenting dynamics carry long term weight that is only now becoming visible. Children raised primarily by single mothers face higher risks across virtually every measurable outcome: academic performance, behavioral issues, incarceration rates, teen pregnancy, poverty, persistence into adulthood. The absence of a father figure correlates strongly with those metrics, not because single mothers are deficient, but because one person cannot replicate the complementary roles two committed parents provide: discipline structure, risk assessment, emotional regulation, and modeling of opposite sex interaction. Boys especially suffer without male guidance, drifting toward aimless peer groups, video game addiction, or early criminal involvement. Girls fare somewhat better in academics, but often replicate the same relational patterns, seeking validation through male attention and struggling with boundaries. Men who opt out of fatherhood entirely avoid passing on their genetics under unstable conditions, but society pays the price through higher social service costs, lower workforce productivity, and intergenerational transmission of dysfunction. Cultural production shifts as well. Media, entertainment, and advertising once revolved around couple centered narratives: rom coms, wedding shows, family sitcoms, home improvement shows, all assumed stable partnerships as the default life script. As pairing declines, those formats lose relevance and audiences. Streaming platforms notice lower engagement with traditional romance content, while content centered on solo male lifestyles, gym culture, finance bro podcasts, stoic philosophy, survivalism gains massive traction. Female creators pivot toward girl boss empowerment, travel vlogs, luxury consumption, but the viewership skews heavily female and younger, with diminishing crossover appeal to men who have tuned out entirely. The cultural conversation becomes increasingly segregated: men speaking to men, women speaking to women with fewer shared reference points and less mutual understanding. Workplace dynamics reflect the growing divide. Men in corporate environments increasingly adopt quiet quitting strategies, minimize emotional labor, avoid mentorship roles that could be weaponized against them, and focus strictly on output that advances their own position. Women who internalize messages about leaning in, networking, aggressively seeking sponsorship often find themselves in environments where male colleagues disengage from informal bonding, leaving them isolated in professional networks that once relied on cross gender rapport. The result is slower advancement for women in male dominated fields, not due to overt discrimination, but due to organic withdrawal of male investment in mixed gender collaboration. Remote work exacerbates this. Men thrive in isolation. Women struggle with the loss of social feedback loops that once provided validation and informal support. Legal systems feel the pressure too. Family courts overloaded with divorce custody and support cases see caseloads stabilize or decline as marriage rates fall, but the remaining cases become more contentious because the men who still enter marriage do so later with more assets, more awareness, and stronger legal protections in place. Prenups separate property trusts offshore accounts. Women entering divorce later in life with fewer years of workforce participation face harsher alimony realities as judges increasingly recognize cohabitation without marriage or short term unions that do not justify lifelong support. The old model of lifelong provision after brief marriage no longer holds when men preemptively structure their finances to withstand dissolution. Technology accelerates every aspect of the separation. Dating apps once promised infinite choice instead delivered burnout and commodification. Men deleted accounts en masse. Women stayed longer, hoping for better matches until burnout caught up there too. Social media algorithms push polarizing content that deepens resentment rather than bridging gaps. Men consume red pill, adjacent material, women consume empowerment content. Both sides radicalize further apart. Virtual reality AI companions and sex tech offer men low friction alternatives to relational risk. Women explore similar tools, but find them less satisfying because the need for real masculine presence proves harder to simulate convincingly. The philosophical underpinning of all this deserves attention. Men rediscovered a form of stoic self mastery that prioritizes virtue, competence, and tranquility over external approval or romantic conquest. The ancient wisdom that happiness flows from controlling what is within your power and accepting what is not has found new life in modern contexts. Women who embraced existential freedom without guardrails often encounter the void Nietzsche warned about when God dies and traditional structures collapse. The question, who am I when no one needs me, becomes acute and unanswered. The cultural narrative sold liberation without warning about the shadow side of absolute autonomy, the isolation, the responsibility, the absence of complementary strength. None of this means the end of human connection. Some men and women still find each other under new terms, mutual respect, clear boundaries, equal investment, genuine compatibility. Those pairings tend to be stronger because both parties enter with eyes open and illusion shattered. But they are the exception, not the rule. And their rarity underscores how far the center has shifted. Most people drift toward parallel lives, men building fortresses of self reliance, women navigating increasingly precarious independence, both adapting to a world where the old interdependence has been replaced by individual survival strategies. The winter deepens not because men are cruel, but because consequences are impartial. Choices made in one decade compound across generations until the bill arrives and must be paid in full. Men paid theirs by walking away, absorbing the short term loneliness for long term sovereignty. Women are now paying theirs through the slow erosion of option security and ease they once took for granted. The reckoning is structural, not personal, and it will continue until new equilibria form around realism rather than fantasy. The patterns we have been tracing show up most starkly when you zoom out to look at entire generations moving through their 20s and 30s under this new regime. The men who came of age after 2010 watched the experiment unfold in real time. They saw fathers, uncles, older cousins navigate divorces that stripped bank accounts, homes, and custody rights, while the cultural messaging insisted that men were the problem: toxic, entitled, privileged, obsolete. Those young men internalized the lesson early: do not sign the contract, do not cohabitate without ironclad protections, do not father children unless paternity and custody are locked down beyond dispute. Many chose the cleanest exit route of all: never start the process at all. They poured energy into crypto stacks, fitness protocols, skill acquisition, side businesses, remote freelancing, anything that compounds without requiring another person's signature or emotional buy in. The result is a cohort of men hitting 30 with net worth, credit scores, and freedom levels their fathers could only dream of at 50. They travel light, live abroad for months at a time, maintain passports with multiple residency stamps, and treat romantic involvement as an optional high risk module rather than a core life requirement. Women in the same age bracket followed a different script, one that was heavily marketed as empowerment. Get the degree chase, the career delay, family build your brand, curate the aesthetic post, the highlights travel solo brunch. With the girls, manifest abundance. The script worked on the surface during the expansion years: cheap credit, low interest rates, abundant entry level, white collar jobs, social media dopamine loops that rewarded visibility over substance. Then the macro environment shifted. Inflation returned. Interest rates climbed, hiring froze, remote jobs evaporated, student loan payments restarted, rent doubled in most major cities, and the aesthetic no longer paid the bills. The women who bet heaviest on that script now find themselves in apartments they can barely afford, careers that plateaued faster than expected, social circles thinning as friends pair off or move away, and a dating inbox that went from overflowing to echo chamber in under 5 years. The contrast could not be sharper. One side streamlined for autonomy and low overhead, the other side built for a world of subsidies and interdependence that no longer exists. This divergence shows up in daily decision making at a granular level. A 32-year-old man making 80,000 a year in a mid-tier city can cover rent, groceries, gym membership, investments, retirement contributions, and still have disposable income for hobbies, travel, or occasional high-end experiences. He cooks most meals, batches protein sources, maintains his own car, handles minor home repairs through YouTube and forums, and views discretionary spending as a deliberate choice rather than a necessity. The same age woman earning roughly the same income often finds herself stretched because her baseline includes higher clothing costs, salon visits, frequent takeout, coffee subscriptions, ride shares to maintain social presence, therapy sessions, wellness memberships, group fitness classes that cost more than solo workouts, and a general expectation of experiences that signal a certain lifestyle. When the external male subsidy vanished, those line items became pure out of pocket and the budget snapped. Attempts to cut back feel like downgrading identity rather than simple frugality, because so much of the spending was tied to external validation rather than internal utility. The man feels richer with less. The woman feels poorer with the same. The psychological toll compounds quietly but relentlessly. Men report higher life satisfaction in large scale surveys of single adults over 30. They cite control over their schedule, freedom from compromise, absence of chronic low grade conflict, and the ability to pursue interests without justification. The satisfaction does not come from hatred of women, it comes from hatred of dysfunction. And the old dynamic delivered plenty of dysfunction manipulation, gaslighting, weaponized vulnerability tests, moving goalposts, silent treatments, weaponized sexuality, conditional affection, all packaged as normal relationship navigation. Once men experienced years without those elements, the relief became physiological: lower resting heart rate, better sleep, deeper focus, sharper decision making. Women in parallel surveys report the opposite trend: rising dissatisfaction, increasing cynicism toward men, growing suspicion that something fundamental broke in the culture, and a pervasive sense that the promised fulfillment of independence never materialized. The narrative shift from "you go girl" to "where are all the good men" reveals the underlying bargain many women made: pursue freedom now, assume provision later. The later arrived and the provision was gone. Institutions feel the strain as well. Universities that expanded aggressively on the promise of credentialed upward mobility now face enrollment cliffs, especially among men who see diminishing returns on six-figure debt for degrees with soft employment prospects. Trade schools, apprenticeships, coding boot camps, and direct to work pathways gain traction among young men because they deliver faster cash flow, lower risk, and clearer paths to ownership, whether that is a plumbing business, a software consultancy, or a content channel. Women continue flooding into higher education at rates approaching 60% of graduates, but the economic premium for those degrees has flattened in many fields, while debt loads have not. The mismatch creates a class of educated women who out earn their male counterparts on paper, yet struggle more with lifestyle maintenance because their consumption patterns did not adjust downward when the macro tide turned. Fertility technology and family planning add another layer of consequence. Women who delayed childbearing into their late 30s and early 40s, banking on career stability and eventual partnership, now confront biological reality head on. Egg freezing became normalized as a hedge, but success rates remain modest and expensive procedures do not guarantee outcomes. Single motherhood by choice through sperm donation or adoption rises among high earning women, yet the data on those children mirrors broader single parent trends, higher risk profiles across development metrics. Men who opt out of fatherhood entirely sidestep those risks altogether, choosing legacy through other avenues, businesses, intellectual property, mentorship, community impact, rather than direct genetic line. The cultural conversation around legacy shifts accordingly, from biological children to building something enduring that outlives the individual. Men lean into that shift. Women find it harder to redefine legacy outside traditional family frames because biology and socialization pull in the opposite direction. Urban planning and infrastructure subtly reflect the changes too. Cities designed around dual income households, two cars, two commutes, family sized units, school districts priced for stability now contend with rising numbers of single person households that demand different amenities, smaller units, walkable neighborhoods, robust delivery ecosystems, co working spaces, gym clusters, rather than sprawling suburbs with backyards. Developers pivot toward micro apartments, luxury studios, high rise singles buildings, while suburban sprawl slows in places where family formation has cratered. Public transit ridership patterns shift. Women rely more heavily on rideshare and transit for safety and convenience. Men walk, bike, or drive efficiently because their routines involve fewer social obligations. The built environment slowly rewires itself around the reality that fewer people are pairing, forming households, and reproducing at replacement levels. Crime statistics and public safety perceptions diverge along gender lines as well. Women report heightened fear of violence, harassment, stalking, random encounters, especially in late night urban settings, as nightlife changes and fewer men act as informal protectors in social venues. Men who once filled those roles, bar bouncers, casual walk home escorts, group deterrence through presence, have largely withdrawn from mixed gender public spaces or limit involvement to strict utility. The result is a perception among women that streets feel less safe even when overall violent crime rates remain stable or decline because the informal guardianship layer has thinned. Men experience the opposite. They feel safer in solitude because they avoid the drama risks and potential false accusations that come with casual mixed gender interactions. The asymmetry feeds into broader cultural mistrust, each side viewing the other as increasingly unpredictable or dangerous. Media consumption habits split sharply. Men gravitate toward long form content podcasts, deep dives, technical tutorials, finance channels, history documentaries, stoic lectures, gaming streams, combat sports analysis content that builds confidence or entertains without emotional hooks. Women lean toward short form, emotional, narrative driven content, reality, television, relationship advice, TikToks, Instagram reels, true crime podcasts, wellness influencers, celebrity drama, all formats that process feelings, seek validation, or simulate connection. The divergence reinforces echo chambers. Men consume content that validates self reliance. Women consume content that validates frustration with men. Cross pollination drops to near zero, which accelerates polarization and reduces shared cultural ground. Corporate human resources departments quietly adjust policies as well. Sensitivity training, diversity initiatives, allyship programs face growing internal skepticism from men who view them as performative risk management rather than genuine equity efforts. Many men adopt defensive postures, keep interactions strictly professional, document everything, avoid one on one mentorships with junior women, limit social events to group settings. The chilling effect reduces informal networking, sponsorship, and knowledge transfer that once helped women advance faster in male dominated fields. The outcome is slower promotions, higher turnover among ambitious women, and a workplace culture that feels colder, more transactional, less collaborative. Companies notice the productivity drag, but struggle to address root causes without confronting the larger gender dynamic shift. Tax and welfare systems face mounting pressure from the demographic changes. Fewer marriages mean fewer dual income households paying higher effective tax rates. Fewer children mean smaller future tax bases supporting larger retiree cohorts. Single men contribute disproportionately to income tax revenue because their earnings compound faster without child related deductions or spousal support obligations. Single women utilize more social services, housing assistance, food programs, mental health subsidies, child care credits, even without children, because financial strain pushes them toward safety nets earlier. The transfer flows in one direction more than ever, straining budgets already stretched by entitlement promises made in a higher fertility, higher marriage era. Philosophically, the moment forces a reckoning with first principles. What is the purpose of romantic partnership in a world of abundant choice, infinite entertainment, artificial intimacy, and economic independence for one sex, but not the other? Men answer that question with a shrug if the partnership adds net value. Great, if not the default, is superior. Women wrestle with the question more intensely because the default no longer feels superior, it feels like absence, lack, diminishment. The asymmetry drives much of the current discourse, women asking why men will not step up, men responding, why should we when the terms are this unfavorable? Neither side seems willing to concede ground first, which locks the stalemate in place until external shocks, perhaps economic collapse, war, demographic implosion, force adaptation. Adaptation will come eventually because biology and incentives eventually override ideology. Some women will recalibrate, lower expectations, offer genuine partnership, build complementary skills, focus on family formation. Earlier in life, seek men who value traditional roles without apology. Some men will re enter the market, but only with non negotiable boundaries. Zero tolerance for red flags, full financial transparency, mutual investment from day one. The middle ground will shrink. The extremes will define the new normal casual sex for those who want it, committed intentional pairing for those who earn it, prolonged solitude for everyone else. The culture will normalize singlehood as a legitimate lifelong path rather than a temporary state or personal failure. Religions, philosophies, self help industries will pivot to serve the new majority reality rather than the old ideal. The institutional responses to this seismic shift are starting to reveal themselves in ways that were predictable, yet still shocking in their speed and scale. Governments across the developed world have begun launching task forces, committees, and funding streams dedicated to what they euphemistically call the male engagement crisis or the loneliness epidemic among young men. But the subtext is always the same. How do we get men back into the provider pipeline without admitting that the pipeline was poisoned by design? Incentives packages appear in policy papers, things like tax credits for marriage wage subsidies tied to dual income households, expanded paternity leave framed as progressive, but really functioning as carrots to lure men back into legal commitments they have already learned to avoid. The irony runs deep. Policymakers who spent decades dismantling traditional incentives through no fault divorce, expanded welfare that substituted for male provision affirmative action, that tilted workplaces and education against male advancement, now scramble to reverse engineer motivation into a demographic that has already internalized the lesson never again trust the system to reward sacrifice. These efforts mostly fall flat because they misunderstand the core psychology at play. Men did not walk away because the rewards were too low. They walked away because the risks became unacceptably high and the rewards illusory. No tax credit offsets the possibility of losing half your net worth in a divorce court. No paternity leave makes up for years of child support payments to a woman who can unilaterally end the marriage. No subsidized date nights restore the dignity stripped by years of being treated as an expendable utility. The state can throw money at the problem, but it cannot restore trust once shattered, nor can it compel men to unlearn the peace they found in autonomy. Attempts to shame men back into line through media campaigns, public service announcements, celebrity op-eds calling for a return to masculinity as responsibility only accelerate the withdrawal because they confirm what men already know. The culture still views male sacrifice as owed rather than earned. Corporate America has its own quiet panic. Human resources departments notice the drop in male applicants for roles requiring high emotional labor, high visibility, or long hours with unpredictable schedules. Men increasingly self select into positions that allow remote work, clear deliverables, minimal meetings, and zero expectation of after hours availability. The companies that once relied on ambitious young men to grind for promotions now face talent shortages in middle management, sales, engineering, leadership tracks. To compensate, they widen applicant pools, lower standards in some cases, and quietly increase compensation for men who do show up because the alternative is watching entire departments age out without replacements. Women fill the gaps in many cases, but the cultural fit suffers when the informal mentorship networks dry up and the unspoken male camaraderie that once greased the wheels of large organizations disappears. Productivity metrics flatten innovation slows, and boardrooms grow nervous as quarterly reports reflect the cost of demographic disengagement. Education systems confront a mirror image problem. Boys lag further behind in reading, writing, and graduation rates every year, while college campuses become increasingly female dominated. Administrators respond with boys only reading programs, STEM outreach targeted at male scholarships for underrepresented men. But the uptake remains low because young men see the end game more clearly than ever. A degree in a soft field leads to underemployment debt and a social environment that treats masculinity as a problem to be managed rather than a strength to be cultivated. Many opt for faster paths to earning coding, boot camps, trade certifications, military service, gig economy, hustles, content creation, all routes that bypass the credentialing gatekeepers and deliver cash flow sooner. The universities left holding empty dorms and declining endowments begin to resemble the retail chains that overexpanded during the consumption boom, only to shrink when consumer behavior changed permanently. Religious institutions face an existential version of the same crisis. Churches, synagogues, mosques that once counted on family units for membership tithing, Sunday school volunteers, now watch attendance crater as marriage and childbearing rates plummet. Sermons that still preach traditional roles find smaller and smaller audiences because the men in the pews are either already checked out or never showed up in the first place. Progressive congregations that embraced gender egalitarianism to stay relevant discover that removing hierarchy and provider expectations does not magically increase male participation. It simply accelerates the exit. Traditionalist groups fare slightly better by doubling down on male space, male leadership, male only fellowships, but even they struggle when the pool of marriage minded young men shrinks year after year. The spiritual void grows wider as people seek meaning outside organized religion in fitness cults, financial independence movements, stoic podcasts, self improvement retreats, places where men can find purpose without the relational obligations that religion historically tied to meaning. Entertainment and popular culture chase the new reality rather than lead it. Streaming services greenlight series centered on lone wolf protagonists, men who solve problems alone, build empires alone, navigate moral gray zones without needing romantic subplots to humanize them. Female led content shifts towards survivalist themes, career revenge fantasies, chosen family narratives that replace biological family with friend groups because the traditional romance art arc no longer resonates with audiences who live the alternative daily. Dating reality shows still draw viewers, but the tone has changed from hopeful matchmaking to forensic analysis of why everything fails spectacularly. The audience watches not to find love, but to confirm their suspicions that the game is rigged, broken beyond repair. Music lyrics pivot too. Male rappers sing about stacking assets, avoiding traps, staying solo. Female artists oscillate between celebrating independence and lamenting the absence of worthy partners, the duality capturing the split screen reality perfectly. International comparisons sharpen the picture. In nations where traditional gender roles eroded later or less completely, the walk away phenomenon appears muted or delayed. Eastern Europe, parts of Latin America, Southeast Asia still show higher marriage rates, younger average age, at first child, more visible male provider behavior, because the cultural software never fully updated to the Western independence model. Yet, even there, globalization, social media, and economic pressures push the same trends forward just at different speeds. South Korea and Japan already live several years ahead in the timeline. Hyper low birth rates, aging populations, male withdrawal into gaming otaku culture. Herbivore, men, women postponing or foregoing marriage entirely. The warning signs flash bright for anyone paying attention. Western nations dismiss those cases as cultural outliers until their own statistics begin converging. Then the denial crumbles. Technology continues to widen the gulf. Artificial intelligence companions, chatbots, virtual girlfriends offer men low stakes, dual interaction without rejection, risk drama, or financial cost. The quality improves monthly voices, grow more natural conversations, more contextual memory persists across sessions. Emotional simulation becomes eerily convincing. For many men, this satisfies enough of the social itch to remove the urgency of real world pursuit. Women experiment with similar tools, but the demand profile differs. They seek presence protection, dominance, emotional depth qualities harder for algorithms to replicate convincingly at scale. The result is another asymmetry. Men find partial substitutes that reduce motivation. To engage women, find substitutes that highlight the gap rather than fill it. Augmented reality dating overlays virtual partners onto real environments, further blurring lines until the distinction between simulated and authentic connection loses practical meaning for a growing subset of users. The legal profession quietly adapts to the new volume and type of cases. Prenuptial agreements grow longer. More detailed ironclad clauses covering cryptocurrency, separate property, inherited wealth income from personal businesses, intellectual property rights. Family law attorneys report a surge in postnuptial modifications, cohabitation agreements, palimony disputes as couples try to retrofit protections after the fact. Custody battles shift toward shared parenting presumptions in some jurisdictions, but high conflict cases still favor mothers in practice, leaving men wary of any arrangement that risks unequal outcomes. The cost of legal entanglement rises while the perceived benefit falls further, reinforcing the incentive to avoid marriage cohabitation and sometimes even casual unprotected sex altogether. Public health authorities track parallel epidemics, one of male overwork and isolation in pursuit of financial security, the other of female anxiety, depression, burnout from carrying unshared loads. Mental health spending skyrockets. Apps therapists, psychiatric medications become normalized across both genders, yet the root causes remain unaddressed because naming them would require dismantling decades of ideological scaffolding. Men self medicate through discipline. Routines, cold plunges, heavy lifting, purposeful work women through community validation substances, retail therapy, endless scrolling, each coping mechanism reflecting the underlying wiring and the available tools for relief. The generational handoff accelerates the pattern. Boys raised by single mothers or in father absent homes absorb the lesson. Implicitly, men leave or get left reliability is not guaranteed. Provision is not permanent, self reliance is the only dependable strategy. They enter adolescence already skeptical of romantic promises, wary of emotional exposure, quick to disengage at the first sign of manipulation. Girls in the same environments watch mothers struggle, juggle roles, resent absent fathers, chase unavailable men, and internalize a different script men cannot be counted on. So build your own fortress guard, your heart, demand everything up front. Both cohorts carry forward the trauma of the transition era, but express it differently. Boys through withdrawal, girls through hypervigilance. The cycle perpetuates unless deliberately interrupted, which few have incentive or roadmap to do. Economic inequality widens along gender lines in unexpected ways. Men who master high income skills, early compound wealth, faster invest aggressively, retire earlier. Women who bet on steady corporate ladders face wage stagnation, glass ceilings, burnout before 40, and retirement savings shortfalls that compound into old age poverty, risks higher than their mothers faced. The wealth gap that once favored men through unequal pay now reemerges through unequal life design choices, the disciplined minimalist versus the consumption oriented lifestyle, the long term compounder versus the short term maximizer. This is not a morality play. It is a physics problem. Incentives shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. Outcomes shape the next round of incentives. Men recalibrated to a world that punished their old behavior and rewarded the new. Women are still recalibrating to a world that no longer rewards theirs. The friction between those two adjustment speeds creates heat, noise, pain, and eventually new equilibrium. But the path there runs through discomfort for everyone involved. No one gets to opt out of reality, only choose which lessons they learn first and how much they pay for them. The raw mechanics of how this plays out in the labor market deserve closer inspection because the numbers tell a story that polite conversation rarely touches. Men are exiting professions that demand high social calibration, constant emotional availability, or roles where performance gets judged through subjective lenses like teamwork, collaboration, inclusivity metrics. Fields like human resources, corporate communications, diversity coordination, event planning, customer success, and service heavy industries see voluntary male attrition rates climbing year over year, not because men suddenly lack competence, but because those environments punish traits. Men are wired to express assertiveness, directness, boundary enforcement, risk tolerance, while rewarding traits that align more naturally with female socialization, empathy, consensus, building relational maintenance, performative warmth. The men who remain in those spaces often adopt camouflage strategies, keep their heads down, minimize opinions, document obsessively, avoid informal power networks that could expose them to accusations. The net effect is a talent drain that leaves organizations thinner on decisive action, heavier on process, and slower to adapt when markets shift. Meanwhile, men flood into domains where output trumps optics, software development, quantitative trading, proprietary trading, algorithmic execution, heavy industry trades, electrical plumbing, HVAC welding, diesel mechanics, heavy equipment operation, logistics, routing, supply chain, optimization, drone piloting, cybersecurity penetration testing, private security executive protection. These fields reward measurable results, tolerate blunt communication, allow autonomy in execution, and pay premiums for competence over congeniality. Entry barriers are lower in many cases. Apprenticeships, paid training on the job certification paths that bypass 4-year degrees, and the ceiling comes from skill mastery rather than political navigation. A 25-year-old welder certified in underwater or pipeline work can clear six figures within 3 years, own his truck, set his schedule, and never sit through another sensitivity seminar. Compare that trajectory to the 25-year-old with a communications degree grinding in an open plan office for 65,000 while navigating endless feedback loops about tone and microaggressions. The economic incentive structure has flipped, and men are following the money with zero apology. Women who remain in high demand, white collar paths face a different squeeze. Promotion tracks that once relied on male sponsors, informal mentorship golf course deals happy hour rapport now run colder as men withdraw from those extracurriculars. The sponsorship gap widens not through overt sexism, but through simple absence. The guy who used to pull you into high visibility projects now works remote, avoids after work drinks, keeps interactions, email only. Women compensate by overperforming, build personal brands, network aggressively, seek female LED affinity groups, but the structural advantage of cross gender informal capital evaporates. Burnout follows faster because the workload stays heavy while the relational scaffolding that once made it bearable disappears. Attrition among women in STEM management, consulting, investment banking rises not because they cannot hack it, but because the environment grows lonelier, less forgiving, less human, as the balancing masculine presence fades. Consumer spending patterns shift in lockstep with these labor changes. Single men allocate dollars toward assets that appreciate or skills that compound: gym equipment, home office setups, high quality tools, courses, certifications, travel gear, durable clothing, minimalist furniture, investment accounts, crypto wallets, collectibles that hold value, vintage watches, rare sneakers, domain names. Consumption stays deliberate, low maintenance, high utility. Single women channel spending toward experiences, signaling social capital, aesthetic maintenance, social proof, wellness retreats, influencer approved skincare lines, limited edition drops, group travel, curated home decor, subscription boxes, meal kits, fitness memberships that double as community. The spending feels expansive, but often funds diminishing returns because much of it depends on external validation loops that weaken when male attention dries up and female social hierarchies grow more competitive internally. Retailers notice luxury brands targeting women maintain volume through scarcity marketing, while mid tier experiential brands suffer as budgets tighten and the thrill of posting fades against mounting credit card balances. The housing crash that never quite arrives for everyone arrives selectively. In cities where single women cluster, demand for 1 and 2 bedroom units in walkable amenity, rich neighborhood stays elevated, pushing rents and purchase prices higher, even as overall household formation slows. Landlords convert larger units into smaller ones, subdivide townhouses, carve studios out of basements, chase the higher per square foot yield from single female tenants who prioritize location, vibe community over square footage. Meanwhile, single men migrate toward exurban pockets, smaller cities, college towns, border regions where property taxes stay low, square footage stays high, and commute times trade for peace. They buy fixer uppers, renovate, slowly build, sweat equity hold long term as inflation erodes mortgage principal. The geographic sorting creates two parallel real estate markets, one pressurized, urban core, expensive, small, cramped, socially dense, the other sprawling, affordable, spacious, solitary. Infrastructure follows. Schools consolidate in depopulating suburbs. Transit expands in dense cores. Roads widen in exurbs. The physical landscape rewrites itself around diverging lifestyle choices. Fertility clinics and reproductive health industries boom, then plateau as the reality of delayed childbearing bites harder. IVF cycles surge among women in their late 30s, early 40s, but success rates hover stubbornly. Low costs escalate into six figures for multiple rounds. Donor egg surrogacy packages become normalized among high earners. Yet the children born through these paths enter a world with fewer siblings, fewer cousins, fewer intergenerational buffers. Pediatric practices in affluent zip codes see more only children, more anxious attachments, more behavioral flags tied to absent fathers or overstretched mothers. The societal cost compounds through special education, needs mental health referrals, tutoring industries, all downstream effects of family structures that no longer default to two committed biological parents. Men who opt out entirely avoid those costs, but bear the cultural judgment of being called selfish, while women who pursue solo motherhood shoulder the full load and often face quiet pity from peers who still hold the traditional script in their heads. Military recruitment reflects the same fault lines. Branches struggle to meet quotas among young men who see enlistment as high risk, low reward in an era where national purpose feels diluted and veteran outcomes include homelessness, PTSD, bureaucratic neglect. Recruitment pivots toward women, offering signing bonuses, streamlined paths to officer ranks, family friendly policies, but physical standards lower to accommodate differences in strength, endurance, injury rates. The force becomes more female, more administrative, less combat oriented, which feeds back into male disinterest. The warrior ethos dilutes when the institution itself softens requirements to hit diversity targets. Private military contracting, security consulting, executive protection fill the gap with men who want the pay, the adventure, the brotherhood without the Pentagon bureaucracy or woke training modules. Sports and fitness culture diverge into gendered silos. Men gravitate toward combat sports, powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit style, functional training, jujitsu, boxing, MMA, hunting, fishing, overland, adventures activities that build raw capability, resilience, dominance, hierarchy, navigation without apology. Women dominate boutique fitness, spin yoga, Pilates, bar, soul cycle group classes that blend movement with community affirmation, emotional release, aesthetic goals. The gym floor itself splits men cluster in free weight zones, heavy racks, chalk dust, grunting, silence. Women fill cardio floors, class studios, mirrored spaces with playlists, and instructors calling out empowerment cues. The separation reinforces different physiological and psychological adaptations. Men build denser muscle, higher testosterone baseline pain. Tolerance, women build endurance flexibility. Mobility, social bonds through shared sweat. Both valid, yet the cultural prestige tilts toward male domains as self reliance narratives gain ground. Language evolves to capture the new reality. Terms like high value, man low effort woman frame, bounce beta provider, simping orbiting soft life, weaponized once niche slang, now mainstream shorthand for observable patterns. Dating lexicon shrinks, approach anxiety replaced by approach indifference. Mixed signals replaced by clear non interest love. Bombing replaced by love scarcity. Women coin phrases like where are the men, man drought, dusty men, to express frustration. Men counter with not my problem, female nature. Accountability, winter is here. The verbal trench warfare mirrors the behavioral one each side, speaking past the other, with decreasing overlap in vocabulary, worldview, shared premises. Elder care looms as the next frontier crisis. Aging boomer parents who divorced in record numbers now face frailty without the traditional family safety net. Adult daughters shoulder disproportionate burden, coordinating doctors, managing medications, handling finances, visiting facilities because sons disengage earlier, maintain lower contact monitor from distance, send checks, but rarely show up for the daily grind. The gender gap in caregiving widens. Daughters burn out sons, preserve boundaries. The pattern repeats. The generation that preached independence now depends on the very interdependence it dismantled. Nursing homes, assisted living facilities fill faster with women who outlive men, yet face higher rates of loneliness, depression, because their social networks were built around family roles that no longer exist. The philosophical undercurrent deserves its own reckoning. Men rediscover classical virtues, Stoicism, Epicurean simplicity, Aristotelian, mean Nietzschean self, overcoming reframed for digital age constraints. Purpose derives from mastery, competence creation legacy through works rather than bloodlines. Women confront the existential cost of radical autonomy when the freedom narrative collides with biological clocks. Social wiring need for protection provision, meaning through connection. The tension births new schools of thought, red pill adjacent communities for men, empowerment, adjacent circles for women, both attempting to retrofit ancient wisdom onto modern wreckage, yet neither fully bridging the chasm because the premises remain incompatible. One prioritizes self, one prioritizes relation. Eventually, equilibrium forms not through reconciliation, but through parallel coexistence. Men build walled gardens of competence, wealth, brotherhood, solitude. Women build networks of mutual support, chosen family, aesthetic, community, careerism. Interaction shrinks to transactional sex friendship, utility mentorship when value aligns. Birth rates stabilize at low levels. Immigration fills labor gaps. Cultural output fragments into niche streams shared. Myths fade. New ones emerge around individualism, resilience, adaptation. The species survives the transition. Scarred leaner, more self aware, less sentimental. The winter does not last forever, but spring arrives colder, leaner, more honest. Men enter it forged in autonomy, women enter it tested by necessity. Neither side returns to the old garden because the gate rusted shut long ago. What grows next depends on who learns fastest, who adapts without resentment, who builds rather than laments. Reality waits for no one. It simply keeps moving and demands you move with it or get left behind. The consequences ripple outward into realms most people never connect to the original cause and effect chain. Take insurance markets as one overlooked arena where the shift manifests in cold, hard premium adjustments. Life insurance actuaries have begun recalibrating tables not just for longevity trends, but for behavioral divergence. Single men now underwrite at lower risk profiles because their mortality curves flatten dramatically when they avoid marriage cohabitation, and the associated stress spikes, car accidents, substance abuse, relational violence all drop when a man removes the primary source of chronic cortisol elevation from his life. Single women conversely see slight upward ticks in certain categories: mental health claims, autoimmune disorders, stress induced cardiac events, sleep disorder diagnoses, all correlating with prolonged periods of unbuffered independence in high cost environments. The premium gap widens, insurers quietly adjust quotes women pay incrementally more for the same coverage, men pay incrementally less. The financial incentive to remain solo compounds itself further. Auto insurance follows a parallel logic. Men who drive less aggressively own fewer vehicles, maintain higher deductibles, and file fewer collision claims because their routines simplify: fewer late night pickups, fewer emotional errands, fewer alcohol fueled arguments that end in fender benders. Women in singlehood status often retain the same driving patterns they developed in coupled life: more city miles, more parking stress, more distraction from phone notifications during rush hour. Claims data reflects it. Women file more comprehensive claims for minor dings, scratches, theft from unlocked cars parked in higher crime zones they frequent for social reasons. Insurers respond with gender neutral pricing that still captures the behavioral delta through zip code, occupation credit, score proxies. The end result feels like another small tax on the single female lifestyle. Tax policy starts bending under the weight too. The IRS notices a surge in head of household filings from single women with no dependents claiming the status through creative interpretations of qualifying relative rules or simply because joint filing is off the table. Single men overwhelmingly file single status, maximize standard deductions, pile into Roth IRAs, HSAs, backdoor conversions because they have no spousal income to consider, no alimony offsets, no child tax credit complications. The aggregate effect is a subtle redistribution. Men overcontribute relative to household size. Women undercontribute yet draw more from refundable credits. earned income tax, credit, child credits. Education credits, the system designed for family units, now subsidizes fragmented ones disproportionately. Energy consumption patterns shift in ways utilities quietly track. Single men downsize living spaces dramatically. Many move into studio apartments, tiny homes, converted vans, overland rigs, or shared male houses where utilities split 4 or 5 ways. Electricity. Natural gas water usage per capita drops because cooking happens in batches, laundry consolidates, showers shorten lights, stay off when not needed. Single women maintain larger footprints, longer, leases bigger square footage for hosting friends, aesthetic living room setups, guest bedrooms. Even when unused, the baseline draw stays higher. Utility companies adjust tiered pricing structures, notice the load imbalance, and gradually shift fixed cost recovery towards smaller, higher per unit users. The single female household absorbs more of the infrastructure burden, while the minimalist male household skates lighter. Food supply chains feel the downstream pressure. Bulk buying declines among singles. Men cook simple, high protein meals: chicken, rice, eggs, ground beef, oats, protein powder. Meal prep. Sundays last the week. Women lean toward convenience. Pre-cut vegetables, organic specialty items, meal kit deliveries, individual portions, restaurant takeout, the grocery basket. Average ticket rises while volume per trip falls. Farmers, wholesalers, distributors notice the pivot toward premium low volume channels. Prices for grass fed beef, organic produce, artisanal cheeses climb faster than staples because demand concentrates in affluent single female demographics who prioritize signaling health status over caloric efficiency. Men drive volume in commodity proteins, grains, legumes, keeping those prices anchored, the bifurcation in food. Economics mirrors the broader lifestyle split. Waste management tells its own story. Single men produce less trash, overall smaller living spaces, fewer impulse purchases, less packaging from subscription boxes, fewer beauty product containers, less food waste from cooking for one efficiently. Single women generate higher volumes of packaging from frequent online orders, cosmetics, skincare, hair care, fashion hauls, delivery bags, bubble wrap, cardboard. The municipal recycling streams swell with single use plastics, luxury branded boxes. The cost of collection, processing, disposal rises. Cities raise trash fees, tipping fees, recycling surcharges. The burden lands heaviest on the demographic producing the most waste per capita. Public transportation ridership data reveals another fracture line. Women rely more heavily on buses, subways, ride shares for perceived safety, convenience, proximity to nightlife, social venues. Evening events, men increasingly walk, bike, drive, personal vehicles, or work remote, eliminating commutes altogether. Transit agencies face declining fare box recovery as ridership skews female, older, lower income. The subsidy requirement grows. Politicians debate fare hikes. Service cuts, electrification mandates, while the male tax base that once supported expansive systems shrinks as men relocate to lower density, lower tax jurisdictions. Air travel booking patterns diverge sharply too. Men book solo trips, adventure travel, fishing expeditions, hunting tags, overland motorcycle routes, minimalist backpacking, long haul flights to low cost destinations where they can stretch dollars. Women book group trips, bachelorette weekends, girls getaways, wellness retreats, destination brunches, couples escapes that never materialize into couples. The average ticket price stays higher because group travel inflates costs through hotels, restaurants, activities priced for shared occupancy that ends up underoccupied when the romantic partner fails to appear. Airlines notice the shift toward male solo economy bookings, female group premium economy. The loyalty programs adjust miles, multipliers perks accordingly. The tourism industry recalibrates around the new traveler archetypes. Resorts once built around honeymoon suites, couples retreats, family villas pivot toward solo traveler, friendly design, single occupancy pricing, female centric spa packages, group yoga retreats, male centric adventure lodges, fishing charters, hunting ranches, overland and meetups. Cruise lines launch solo cabins, no single supplement sailings targeted at women seeking community men. Seeking escape, the demographic targeting sharpens as operators chase the spending power that remains. Museums, galleries, theaters, concert venues feel the attendance drop from coupled outings. Date nights once drove ticket sales. Restaurant reservations, bar tabs now evaporate. Men attend alone or with male friends for specific interests, sports, documentaries, history exhibits, metal shows, comedy roasts. Women cluster in group outings, book clubs, art walks pop up, exhibit spoken word nights. The venues adapt by offering more group discounts, female centric programming, solo ticket pricing that quietly penalizes the single purchaser. The cultural consumption splits along gender lines with less crossover. Libraries and bookstores notice similar patterns. Men gravitate toward nonfiction sections, finance biographies, technical manuals, history, philosophy, stoicism, survivalism, self sufficiency, while women dominate fiction, romance, self help, memoir, wellness, spirituality. The borrowing and purchasing habits reflect different quests. Men seek tools for mastery, women seek narratives for meaning. The quiet shelves tell the story of two populations reading past each other. Online learning platforms see the enrollment explosion among men in high ROI courses, coding, data science, quantitative finance, copywriting, sales funnels, e commerce dropshipping, while women concentrate in lower barrier creative courses, graphic design, photography, interior styling, social media management, digital marketing. The completion rates diverge. Men finish faster, apply ruthlessly, women drop off higher, pursue passion projects that rarely monetize. The skill acquisition gap widens into an earnings gap that compounds annually. The gig economy platforms reflect the same sorting. Men dominate delivery driving, rideshare during peak hours, task rabbit handyman jobs, moving labor snow removal yard, work the physical high risk, high reward. Gigs, women cluster in virtual assistant content moderation, tutoring, pet sitting, house sitting. The relational low barrier, lower ceiling gigs. The earnings disparity grows not from discrimination, but from choice. Architecture. Men chase surge pricing, women chase flexibility. The platform algorithms optimize for both, yet the payouts tell the real story. Charity donation patterns shift too. Men give more to veterans, first responders, disaster relief, boys, education, trade schools, homelessness initiatives, direct cash transfers. Women give more to women's shelters, animal rescue, environmental causes, children's, hospitals, arts education, medical research. The philanthropic divide mirrors the value divergence, protection, competence provision versus care healing connection. The nonprofit sector quietly adjusts fundraising language to capture both without alienating either. The cryptocurrency blockchain space becomes almost exclusively male territory. Men stack, Sats mine stake, trade leverage, farm yield, provide liquidity run nodes, build protocols, the volatility tolerance risk, appetite, technical curiosity align with male wiring. Women participate far less, viewing it as gambling speculation, distraction from relational priorities. The wealth concentration in digital assets tilts heavily male. The next generation of millionaires arrives disproportionately from that cohort. Space exploration, private rocketry, satellite deployment, asteroid mining visions draw almost entirely male talent and capital. The frontier mindset, the high risk, high reward calculus, the willingness to delay gratification for decades long payoffs all resonate more strongly with men who have already embraced long term compounding over short term consumption, women focused talent in earth bound sustainability, climate tech, regenerative, and agriculture, social impact ventures. The divergence in ambition scope, timescale shapes the future. Literally, one cohort builds toward the stars, the other stewards the home planet. This is the world being forged in real time, not through decree, but through millions of individual choices aligning with incentives that no central planner designed, yet everyone now lives inside. The architecture of daily life, the prices paid, the paths taken, the futures built all bend around. The central fact men walked, chose peace, stayed gone. Women face the mirror held up by reality and must decide what reflection they can live with. No one escapes the math. No one outruns the consequences. The only variable left is how gracefully or bitterly each side navigates the terrain ahead. The institutional scaffolding that once supported traditional family formation now creaks under its own obsolescence. And nowhere is that clearer than in the transformation of Social Security and pension systems. These programs were engineered in an era when most adults married young, stayed married, raised multiple children, and retired as couples with one primary earner, typically the husband carrying the heavier lifetime contribution load. Payroll taxes collected from that structure funded benefits distributed to couples who often outlived the working years together. Fast forward to the current demographic reality, single men contribute robustly throughout peak earning years without ever drawing spousal or survivor benefits. Single women contribute less in aggregate lifetime taxes due to career interruptions, part time shifts, maternity leaves, and then draw benefits earlier, longer, and often at higher replacement rates relative to their contributions because longevity advantages compound. The math creates a structural deficit that grows wider each year as marriage rates stay depressed and childlessness climbs. Policymakers float incremental fixes. Raising retirement ages means testing benefits, tweaking COLA formulas, but none address the root mismatch. The system was never calibrated for a society where half the population opts out of the family formation model that generated surplus contributions. The quiet insolvency accelerates not through dramatic collapse, but through gradual benefit erosion, higher taxes, slower adjustments that hit future retirees hardest, the very cohorts already navigating adulthood without the old safety nets. Child welfare agencies and foster care systems absorb another layer of fallout. As two parent households become scarcer, the number of children entering state care rises not from overt abuse in most cases, but from parental overload, single mothers hitting breaking points, financial collapse, substance, relapse, mental health crises, lack of extended family backup. Boys in these systems disproportionately cycle through group homes, residential treatment, juvenile detention, because the absence of consistent male authority figures leaves behavioral voids that peer groups and institutional staff struggle to fill. Girls fare marginally better in placement stability, but carry higher risks of early sexualization exploitation, running away cycles of unstable attachments. Adoption rates stagnate because prospective parents now skew toward older couples or same sex pairs, while the supply of adoptable infants shrinks and the pool of older children with trauma histories grows. The cost to taxpayers escalates group home placements, therapeutic foster care, psychiatric hospitalizations, special education placements, juvenile justice processing, all line items that balloon when family units fragment and men no longer anchor households at scale. School districts confront cascading effects that administrators rarely tie back to the macro gender shift. Teacher shortages hit hardest in districts serving high poverty, high single motherhood areas where classroom management demands escalate. Boys arrive with less impulse control, poorer emotional regulation, weaker academic preparation because home environments lack the complementary discipline structure, risk calibration that fathers historically provided. Suspension expulsion rates for boys climb, behavioral intervention teams multiply. Individualized education plans proliferate, special education referrals surge. The administrative burden grows while funding stays flat or declines. Districts respond by lowering behavioral thresholds, hiring more counselors, paraprofessionals, behavior specialists, yet outcomes barely budge because the root input, missing male modeling and boundary enforcement, cannot be outsourced effectively to school staff. Meanwhile, affluent districts with higher two-parent rates maintain better discipline, academic performance, teacher retention. The performance gap between family stable and family fragmented zip codes widens into an educational chasm that future earnings inequality will mirror. Higher education financing models crack under the weight too. Student loan portfolios swell with debt carried disproportionately by women who pursued longer degrees in lower ROI fields, education psychology, sociology, communications, liberal arts graduate degrees that lead to public sector nonprofit administrative roles with modest pay ceilings. Forgiveness programs, income driven repayment, public service loan, forgiveness skew toward those fields and those demographics because men cluster in trades tech entrepreneurship paths that require less debt and generate faster cash flow to pay off whatever loans exist. The federal balance sheet absorbs hundreds of billions in write offs targeted at borrowers who never reach high income brackets, while men who never borrowed heavily or paid off quickly contribute taxes that fund the forgiveness. The irony compounds as the system subsidizes extended adolescence for one group, while the other group funds it through higher lifetime earnings without drawing equivalent relief. Mental health infrastructure strains differently across the divide. Men underutilize traditional therapy, preferring action oriented solutions, gyms, martial arts, stoic reading, peer groups, online forums, cold exposure protocols that deliver measurable physiological improvements without requiring verbal processing of emotions. When men do seek help, they favor short term solution focused modalities, coaches, psychiatrists, prescribing testosterone optimization or ADHD medications rather than open ended talk therapy. Women utilize therapy at 3 to 4 times the rate, consuming the bulk of counselor, psychologist, social worker hours, group therapy slots, antidepressant prescriptions, benzodiazepine scripts. The demand outstrips supply wait lists, lengthen burnout among providers, rises. The system tilts towards serving female emotional processing needs, while male needs get met through parallel, unregulated channels. The mismatch leaves male suicide rates elevated not because men suffer more in absolute terms, but because their coping mechanisms stay outside formal care networks that could intervene earlier. Corrections and criminal justice absorb downstream pressure from father absence patterns that began decades ago. Incarcerated populations remain overwhelmingly male and disproportionately come from single mother households where boys lacked consistent male guidance boundaries, consequences modeling for deferred gratification. Reentry programs struggle because returning citizens often reenter the same environments that produced the original criminogenic factors. No stable father figure, no extended male kin network, no positive peer group pulling in constructive directions. Recidivism stays stubbornly high. The cost of incarceration, probation, parole, electronic monitoring, halfway houses, drug courts all escalate, while prevention efforts focused on early childhood interventions show diminishing marginal returns. When the primary missing ingredient, consistent male provision and authority, cannot be legislated into existence. Media advertising dollars follow the diverging consumer bases with precision. Brands targeting men pivot toward performance tools, rugged gear, financial products, crypto wallets, privacy software, tactical apparel, high end audio equipment, gaming peripherals, anything that enhances competence, autonomy, self mastery. Brands targeting women lean into self care, luxury, skincare, wellness supplements, athleisure, home fragrance candles, subscription beauty boxes, experiences marketed as empowerment. The ad spend grows lopsided because female consumption remains more visible, more shareable, more tied to social signaling, while male consumption hides in plain sight, utilitarian quiet compounding. Agencies notice click through rates, conversion funnels, retention metrics shift. The creative brief changes from aspirational coupledom to solo flourishing. Yet the underlying tension persists. Women spend to fill voids, men spend to fortify strengths. The economic signals reinforce the separation. The real estate development pipeline adjusts to household size realities. Multifamily builders scale down unit sizes, increase density, add co living amenities, rooftop social spaces, co working lounges, package rooms, bike storage, EV chargers, targeting the single professional who values location efficiency over square footage. Suburban single family builders see demand soften for four-bedroom colonials with yard swing sets because young couples delay or forgo children while empty nesters downsize earlier. Developers repurpose large lots into townhome clusters, duplexes, accessory dwelling units, granny flats, catering to multi generational arrangements or unrelated adults sharing costs. The built form literally shrinks to match the shrinking household. Urban nightlife ecosystems contract in scope and energy. Bars, clubs, lounges once thrived on mixed gender crowds, date nights, groups of singles circulating, men buying rounds, women drawing attention. The social lubricant flowed freely. Now, venues see more all male tables watching fights, sports poker nights, more all female groups celebrating birthdays, bachelorettes, fewer mixed casual interactions. The vibe shifts toward segregation. Men seek low drama environments, women seek safety in numbers. The cover charge, drink, minimum door revenue adjusts downward. Owners pivot to day parties, bottomless brunch drag, shows themed events, anything that guarantees female group attendance because that remains the spending engine. The pet industry explodes as a proxy for nurturing instincts without human dependence. Men adopt large breed working dogs, huskies, malamutes, German shepherds, cane corsos, dogs that require discipline, training structure, exercise. The ownership mirrors their own lifestyle. Emphasis on routine mastery, responsibility. Women adopt smaller companion breeds, French bulldogs, cavaliers, Pomeranians, cats, emotional support animals. The pets serve as effective substitutes. Affection, without reciprocity, demands the market segments cleanly. One side buys heavy duty gear leashes, harnesses training collars. The other side buys apparel carriers, strollers, boutique food treats. The veterinary pharmaceutical supply chain grows fat on both, but the emotional valence differs sharply. The luxury watch resale market becomes a telling barometer of male wealth concentration. Rolex, AP, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet trade at premiums among men who treat horology as portable assets, status signals, engineering mastery store of value. Women participate far less preferring jewelry handbags, experiential luxury. The secondary market liquidity stays robust because men buy to hold flip. Strategically, the capital flows into hard assets rather than depreciating consumables. Venture capital allocation reflects the founder demographic shift. Seed stage deals concentrate in male founded companies building in deep tech, AI, blockchain, robotics, defense space, biotech hardware, because those domains reward obsessive focus, technical risk tolerance, long time horizons. Women found more in consumer social impact, edtech, health tech, wellness. The funding gap widens, not from bias, but from differing appetite for moonshot bets versus incremental lifestyle improvements. The unicorns that emerge skew male founded. The wealth creation follows suit. This granular mapping of consequences across dozens of sectors reveals the same underlying dynamic. The withdrawal of men from traditional relational provision roles forces every downstream system to adapt or atrophy. No central authority orchestrates the changes, yet the adaptations converge toward the same endpoints: smaller households, leaner consumption, higher male asset accumulation, higher female service utilization, colder institutions, more fragmented social fabric. The process unfolds slowly enough to deny at first, then fast enough to overwhelm denial. The winter deepens not as punishment, but as physics. Each choice compounds each incentive, bites harder until the landscape looks unrecognizable to anyone who remembers the old map. The transformation reaches into the quietest corners of everyday infrastructure, places people rarely think to look until the absence becomes impossible to ignore. Public restrooms in high traffic urban areas provide one small but telling example. Men's facilities historically saw heavier use during peak commuting hours, lunch rushes after work, because men moved through cities faster, more purposefully shorter, dwell times less preparation. Women's lines stretched longer due to companion habits, group coordination, clothing complexity, hygiene routines. As male foot traffic thins in downtown cores, evening entertainment districts, men either commute, less stay home work remote, or relocate. The queues at women's restrooms grow disproportionately longer, while men's rooms sit underutilized with faucets dripping paper towels untouched. Facilities management responds by converting some men's rooms to unisex or all gender options, reducing cleaning cycles in low use areas, reallocating janitorial labor toward the higher demand zones. The subtle reallocation of resources follows the demographic footprint exactly. Street vending and food cart ecosystems adjust in parallel. Lunch hour carts once thrived on quick, high volume male office worker traffic burgers, tacos, halal platters, protein heavy portable meals grabbed on the go with minimal conversation. As those workers vanish or eat at home, the carts pivot towards slower turnover items: salads, smoothie bowls, acai bowls, poke bowls, Instagram worthy presentations, longer dwell times, higher average checks. The vendor mix shifts from immigrant men running efficient protein lines to younger women or collectives offering wellness aligned options. The street economy literally changes flavor profile and price point to chase the remaining spenders. Bike share and scooter programs track usage data that mirrors the split. Men dominate utilitarian trips, short point to point commutes, errands, gym runs, hardware store dashes. The trips stay brief, efficient, low cost per mile. Women use the systems more for leisure loops, park circuits, social rides, group outings. The average ride duration stretches the wear on tires, batteries, frames, increases maintenance costs. Climb operators raise per minute rates or introduce premium tiers for longer unlocks. The pricing model tilts toward penalizing leisure use while rewarding the utilitarian pattern men follow naturally. Library usage statistics reveal another quiet bifurcation. Circulation of physical books among men concentrates in practical nonfiction categories, programming manuals, automotive repair, electrical codes, business strategy, military history, firearms, training, wilderness survival. The borrowing patterns favor items that solve immediate problems, build tangible skills. Women drive higher circulation in contemporary fiction, romance thrillers, self improvement memoirs, wellness guides, spiritual guides. The emotional narrative arc dominates the borrowing. The library budget for new acquisitions splits accordingly. More shelf space for feel good stories, less for technical manuals. The collection itself begins to reflect the diverging inner worlds. Post office and shipping center traffic patterns diverge too. Men ship fewer but larger, heavier packages, tools, parts, equipment, gun safes, ammunition components, car components, motorcycle parts. The transactions stay infrequent but high value. Women ship more frequently, smaller, lighter packages, returns from online fashion, beauty subscription boxes, gifts to friends, family. The volume drives higher staffing, needs longer lines, more parcel lockers installed. The Postal Service quietly reallocates resources toward the higher frequency, lower margin side, while the occasional big ticket mail shipment subsidizes the system through higher postage paid. Dry cleaning and laundry services notice the drop in men's dress shirts, suits, blazers, business casual that once formed a steady revenue stream. Men adopt permanent press technical fabrics. Wrinkle resistant merino wool, blends, machine washable chinos. The need for professional laundering plummets. Women maintain higher demand for delicate items, silk blouses, dresses, tailored pieces, dry clean. Only labels. The service mix shifts toward more wash and fold, more alterations, more stain removal. The pricing adjusts upward for specialty care, while the volume from male clients evaporates. Car wash chains see similar realignment. Men favor express exterior. Only washes quick vacuum high. Throughput bays, the focus stays on efficiency cost per wash. Women opt for full service. Interior detailing, hand wax ceramic coating packages. The average ticket climbs. The bays fill with longer dwell times, higher labor input. The business model tilts toward premium female clientele, while the low cost, high volume male traffic thins. Parking garage revenue models change under the hood. Monthly parkers once dominated with corporate employees, men clocking long hours downtown. The contracts provided stable cash flow. As remote work hybrid schedules spread and men relocate, the transient daily hourly parking rises disproportionately from women attending events, meetings, social functions. The turnover increases wear on gates, ticket machines, elevators. The operational cost creeps up while the predictable revenue base shrinks. Operators raise rates, introduce dynamic pricing. The garage becomes more expensive for the remaining users. Hotel occupancy during weekdays versus weekends tells its own story. Business travel hotels once filled Sunday through Thursday with male heavy sales, engineering, consulting crews. The restaurants, bars, lobbies hummed with deal talk networking. Now weekday occupancy softens, while weekend leisure bookings hold steadier, driven by female led group travel, bachelorettes, reunions. Wellness escapes the hotel chains, pivot toward boutique experiences, spa packages, rooftop yoga, bottomless mimosa brunches. The corporate travel segment shrinks, the leisure segment must carry more of the load. Airbnb and short term rental hosts adapt listings to the new guest profiles. Properties marketed to business travelers, men seeking quiet workspaces, fast Wi Fi, blackout curtains, gym access, see lower booking velocity. Host reorient toward female friendly aesthetics, floral linen, scented candles, curated self care baskets, kitchen stocked with matcha oat milk. The listing photos shift from minimalist functional to warm, inviting layered textures. The pricing holds or rises because the target guest spends more on add ones experiences with local recommendations. The wedding industry contracts in ways that cascade through adjacent sectors. Fewer marriages mean fewer venues, photographers, videographers, florists, cake bakers, dress shops, tux rentals. The average spend per event stays high among those who do marry, but the total volume drops dramatically. Vendors diversify into milestone birthdays, gender reveal parties, vow renewals, elopement packages. The once booming bridal market becomes a niche. The vendors who fail to pivot face closure or consolidation. Divorce adjacent services shrink in parallel. Mediators, attorneys, therapists, financial planners who specialized in high conflict dissolutions see caseloads thin as marriage rates fall. The remaining cases skew older, longer duration, higher asset complexity. The hourly rates climb. The industry consolidates into boutique practices, serving the last wave of dissolving boomer and Gen X unions. The baby product market faces a slow motion implosion. Strollers, cribs, car seats, high chairs, diapers, Formula One staple categories for young families now sell in lower volumes. Retailers reduce shelf space, pivot toward pet strollers, cat furniture, dog apparel. The nursery section shrinks, the toy section pivots toward collectibles, STEM kits, educational games for older only children. The demographic reality redraws retail floor plans one aisle at a time. Greeting card aisles in drugstores and big box retailers contract noticeably. Anniversary cards, wedding cards, baby shower cards, Father's Day cards in bulk drop off. While self care encouragement, friendship affirmation cards expand the emotional marketplace, shifts from celebrating milestones to soothing isolation. The industry follows the money. The cosmetics and personal care aisle tells a similar tale. Men's grooming stays minimal. Efficient multi use products, 3-in-1 shampoo, face wash, body wash, beard oil that doubles as hair product. The shelf space remains modest. Women's skincare, hair care, makeup, fragrance lines expand endlessly. New launches, monthly, limited editions, influencer collabs. The real estate grows, the revenue grows, the debt load for the consumer grows with it. Fitness equipment home gym sales skew heavily toward men buying racks, barbells, plates, adjustable, dumbbells, heavy bags, pull up bars. The purchases prioritize raw strength, power, endurance. Women drive sales in compact foldable equipment, resistance bands, yoga mats, Pilates, reformers, mirrors with classes. The home gym becomes a studio for some, a sanctuary for others. The equipment reflects the goal. One side builds muscle, one side maintains form. The book publishing pipeline adjusts release schedules and marketing. Male targeted nonfiction drops more frequently. Finance, investing, crypto, biography, history, philosophy. The backlist stays evergreen. The frontlist sells through targeted podcasts, forums. Female targeted fiction and nonfiction, romance, contemporary thrillers, self help wellness memoir. The marketing leans on book talk, Instagram, reels, emotional hooks. The algorithms push different content to different feeds. The cultural output splits cleanly. Streaming algorithms learn the pattern fast. Male viewing clusters around long form documentaries, war history, true crime finance breakdowns, combat analysis, gaming streams. The watch time accumulates in focused bursts. Female viewing favors episodic dramas, reality dating competition shows reality competition, emotional arcs. The binge sessions stretch longer. The completion rates vary. The recommendation engines reinforce the silos. One viewer gets jujitsu breakdowns, the other gets love is blind reunions. The podcast landscape mirrors the divide. Male dominated shows hit finance, stoicism, fitness, entrepreneurship, philosophy, red pill, adjacent analysis. The listener base grows through word of mouth, long tail retention. Female dominated shows center relationships, wellness manifestation, girl talk, celebrity gossip. The listener base spikes through social sharing, viral clips, the monetization paths, diverge, sponsorships, ads, premium subs. One side sells tools, one side sells feelings. Online forum culture hardens into gendered enclaves. Men's spaces emphasize data driven analysis, build threads, gear lists, progress pics, form checks. The moderation stays strict on emotion venting. Women's spaces prioritize support, venting advice, sharing photo comparisons. The moderation focuses on safety affirmation. The tone culture vibe diverges. The internet becomes two parallel internets linked by thin threads of shared infrastructure. This exhaustive catalog of micro adjustments across every layer of society shows the same truth, operating at different scales. Men streamlined, minimized, optimized for autonomy. Women maintained, expanded, sought connection through consumption, community validation. The systems bend to accommodate both, yet the cost structure tilts ever more toward the side that retained higher overhead. The friction generates heat in budgets, infrastructure, social trust, institutional capacity. The winter does not announce itself with fanfare. It simply arrives in higher fees, longer waits, colder lobbies, thinner services, leaner futures. The only question left is how long each side can sustain its chosen path before the next forced recalibration hits. Shout out to the 1 hour gang. You grinded through another deep slice of the reality map. Respect for your willingness to see how far the roots actually run. If these angry guy breakdowns keep peeling back layers you did not expect and you want more of this level of detail, consider buying me a Red Bull with the link in the description. It keeps the excavation going. Hit the comments with what piece of this infrastructure shift stood out to you or where you see the next big adjustment coming. Share your read. I go through everyone. Like the video, if it added something new to your perspective, do not forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away in cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.